There was a time not so long ago when the idea of staying home seemed like the ultimate prize. When I thought waking up whenever I wanted and filling my days with coffee dates and Pilates classes and redecorating rooms that didn't need redecorating would be enough. And for a while, it was. Eric was proud to provide that life for me. Proud to tell anyone who would listen that his wife didn't have to work, didn't have to worry about anything except enjoying herself. I smiled and played along, convincing myself that being cared for like that was enough, that being safe was the same thing as being happy. But days started blending into each other, the empty hours stretching longer and longer until even the softest couch and the biggest house felt like a gilded cage. I would stare at my phone, refreshing apps I didn't even care about, wandering from room to room, trying to invent tasks to justify my own existence, feeling a restlessness under my skin that no amount of shopping trips or lunch dates could quiet. When a friend mentioned there was an opening at her company, something simple, assistant work for one of the higher-ups, I jumped at it without thinking. Told Eric it was just something to keep me busy. Something light, no pressure, no real commitment. He didn't love the idea, but he didn't fight me either. He kissed me on the forehead and told me he was proud of me for wanting something for myself. Told me I would be amazing. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first day at the office felt like stepping into a new skin. The hum of printers, the clatter of keyboards, the endless chatter of people actually doing things. It woke something in me that had been sleeping for years. I loved the pace, the purpose, even the mundane rituals of coffee runs and scheduling meetings. The feeling that someone needed me for something real, something outside the house, something that had nothing to do with clean laundry or dinner reservations. And then there was Dylan. He wasn't my boss, wasn't someone I should have even crossed paths with all that often. But from the moment he first walked past my desk, dark hair, easy grin, sleeves rolled up over strong forearms, something shifted inside me. He stopped to introduce himself, made a dumb joke about needing a personal assistant too if I had any free time, and I laughed harder than the joke deserved. It wasn't just that he was handsome. It was the way he looked at me. Really looked at me. Like I wasn't just a name on a resume or someone's wife playing at being useful for a few hours a day. At first, it was harmless. Little comments in passing. Smiles that lingered a beat too long. Questions about my weekend plans asked too casually to be casual at all. I told myself it was innocent, that I was imagining things, that even if Dylan was flirting, and it definitely felt like he was, it didn't matter because nothing would ever happen. I was married. I loved Eric. I wasn't that kind of woman. But that restless energy that had driven me back into the working world didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. And Dylan fed it without even trying. A compliment here. A lingering glance there. Small moments that stacked up into something heavier. Something dangerous. Something that made my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Eric noticed the change before I did. He noticed how often I smiled at my phone when it buzzed. He noticed how I started taking longer to get ready in the mornings, how I lingered over my makeup, how I chose heels a little higher, skirts a little tighter. He didn't say much at first, just watched, waited. And I told him, it was nothing. That I was just happy, just confident, just excited about my new job. That he had nothing to worry about. But even then, even as the words left my mouth, part of me knew I was already lying. Not about what had happened. Nothing had happened. Not yet. But something had already shifted inside me. A door cracked open, just wide enough to let the darkness creep in. And I wasn't sure I wanted to close it. It started with coffee. the way most harmless things do. An invitation slid across my desk on a sticky note that said, "Need caffeine?" with a little smiley face drawn underneath, so casual it could have meant anything, so innocent it was easy to say yes. We went to the cafe across the street, the one with the too strong coffee and the sticky floors, and we sat in a corner booth talking about nothing, about movies and vacations and the kind of small, safe topics you hide behind when you know better than to dig too deep. Dylan made me laugh. Really laugh. The kind of breathless, head-thrown-back laughter I hadn't realized I missed until it was tumbling out of me. It was still innocent then. A coffee break. An inside joke about our boss's awful ties. A way to break up the day. But it didn't stay that way. The texts started getting longer, slipping into the evenings after work. Little check-ins that had no reason to exist except that neither of us wanted to let the conversation end. Dylan would send a meme, a video, a random thought, and I would catch myself smiling at my phone while Eric sat across from me on the couch, completely unaware. Or maybe not unaware. Maybe just pretending not to notice because noticing would mean asking questions neither of us were ready to answer. Eric started watching me more closely. Started noticing how often my phone buzzed and how fast I snatched it up. Started noticing how I angled the screen away from him, how I put it face down on the table when I got up to grab a drink or answer the door. I had excuses ready before he even asked. Work is crazy. It's just office group chats. You're being paranoid. And he wanted to believe me. He needed to believe me. So he did. Meanwhile, Dylan and I kept pushing the line. Meeting for coffee turned into meeting for drinks after work. A drink turned into two. Two turned into staying until the bar closed and we were the only ones left laughing too loudly, leaning too close. He never pushed, never made a move, never forced the next step. He didn't have to. The air between us was heavy enough, charged enough, that when we finally touched, a hand on my lower back guiding me through a crowded doorway, a brush of fingers when I handed him a glass, it felt inevitable. I told Eric I was working late. I told him I had a last-minute meeting, a client dinner, a team-building event. I told him whatever I had to tell him to buy a few more hours of freedom. A few more hours where I could pretend to be someone else. Someone lighter. Someone braver. Someone who wasn't chained to a life she had asked for but didn't know how to live inside anymore. He would text me while I was with Dylan. Little messages like, "Miss you," and "Drive safe." And I would glance at the screen, heart clenching, and then slide it back into my purse without answering right away. Too wrapped up in the way Dylan's eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way he listened to me like everything I said was a secret worth keeping. I justified it by telling myself we hadn't done anything yet. We hadn't kissed. We hadn't crossed any lines you couldn't explain away with a clever enough story. It was just friendship. The same lie I had fed Eric. The same lie I was starting to feed myself, but it got harder to believe when we started finding ways to be alone. When Dylan started finding reasons to walk me to my car even when it wasn't necessary. When I started lingering in his office after everyone else had gone home. Both of us pretending we were just too busy to leave, that we just had a few more things to finish. It wasn't just at work either. We started meeting on weekends, group outings with coworkers that somehow turned into stolen glances across bonfires, accidental touches under picnic tables, private jokes whispered between beers. We even went on a camping trip with our spouses, a group trip with other couples from work, where Eric and Dylan's wife sat laughing by the fire while Dylan and I slipped away under the excuse of gathering more wood, disappearing into the woods for 30 breathless minutes where we did everything but what we were supposed to. Nothing happened. Not really. Nothing we couldn't deny if it ever came to that. But something had happened. Something that couldn't be undone. And even as I smiled at Eric across the fire, even as I kissed him goodnight in our tent under the stars, Part of me knew that the real betrayal had already begun. The first time it happened, it was almost laughably casual. A few drinks after work turning into a walk back to Dylan's car, a joking dare to see who could kiss better, turning into a kiss that was anything but a joke. It wasn't a kiss you could brush off later, not one of those stupid, drunken mistakes you could pretend didn't mean anything. It was the kind of kiss that left no room for pretending, the kind that cracked open something deep and dark inside me that I hadn't even realized was still alive. And once it started, there was no stopping it. After that night, every time I said I was working late, it meant sneaking off to see him. Every time I told Eric not to wait up, it meant I was pressing myself against Dylan's chest in the back seat of his car, or slipping into a cheap motel room where we could pretend, for a few stolen hours, that the rest of the world didn't exist. It wasn't even about love. It wasn't about wanting to build a life together. It was about escape, pure and simple. The way he made me feel alive again, reckless again, young and hungry and selfish in a way I hadn't been since long before Eric ever slid a ring onto my finger and promised me forever. And the worst part was how easy it became. How natural. I learned how to lie without blinking, learned how to come home smelling like hotel soap and stale coffee instead of Dylan's skin, learned how to smile and laugh and listen to Eric's stories about his day without letting any of the guilt show. I became two people, switching masks so easily I sometimes forgot which one was supposed to be real. Eric kept suspecting, of course. He kept noticing the way I smiled at my phone, the way I laughed too loudly at texts I refused to show him, the way I turned away when he reached for me in bed, claiming I was just tired, just stressed, just busy with work. He started checking my phone when I left it unattended, but I was always one step ahead. Deleting messages, clearing call logs, setting up fake names and hidden apps so even if he looked, he wouldn't find anything. I made him feel crazy. I made him feel guilty for not trusting me. And he let me. Because loving someone sometimes means choosing their lies over your own truth. Meanwhile, Dylan and I grew bolder. We found a rhythm, a dangerous one, slipping away for an hour here, 2 hours there, meeting in dark parking lots and quiet hotel rooms, always telling ourselves it would be the last time, always knowing it wouldn't be. It wasn't just the secrecy that made it addictive. It was the contrast, the brutal whiplash between the clean, ordered life I had with Eric and the messy, burning chaos I had with Dylan. Some weekends, we still did group trips with our spouses, hiking trails, lake houses, wine tastings, always smiling for the pictures, always playing the perfect couples. And somehow, in the middle of all that normalcy, Dylan and I would find ways to disappear, ducking away under some excuse or another, finding a hidden path or an empty room or the shadowed side of the house to lose ourselves in each other. 30 minutes, 20 minutes. Sometimes even just 10 stolen, frantic minutes were enough to feed the addiction, enough to make everything else bearable. And afterward, I would smooth my hair, reapply my lipstick, and walk back into the circle of people who trusted me without question, who believed I was exactly who I pretended to be. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt like a monster. And sometimes, when I caught Eric's eyes across the campfire, or when he slipped his hand into mine without hesitation, without doubt, I did. For a moment. But then the moment would pass, and the hunger would win again. I wasn't falling in love with Dylan. I wasn't trying to destroy my marriage. I was just trying to feel something. Anything. Trying to fill a void that kept growing no matter how many lies I poured into it. And deep down, under all the justifications and excuses, I knew one brutal, undeniable truth. You can't live two lives forever. Sooner or later, one of them has to end. At first, the guilt came in flashes, small and sharp. a flicker of shame when Eric kissed my forehead before leaving for work, a spike of panic when he told me he loved me without hesitation, without suspicion. It was easy enough to drown at first, to push it down under excuses and rationalizations, to tell myself that everyone has secrets, that marriages survive worse things than a few stolen hours in a hotel room. But guilt has a way of growing when you try to ignore it, swelling and twisting inside you until it fills every quiet moment with noise you can't shut off. I started sleeping badly, tossing and turning under the weight of everything I wasn't saying. I would wake up gasping from dreams where Eric found out, where he stood in the middle of our living room holding my phone in one hand and divorce papers in the other, his face not angry, not even sad, just blank, like he couldn't recognize me anymore. I would lie there staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully beside me, wondering how he could love me so much, trust me so blindly, when I had become a person I didn't even recognize. I pulled away from Dylan, or tried to, made excuses, turned down invitations, pretended I was busy with work or tired or fighting off a cold. But Dylan wasn't stupid. He could feel the distance, and he didn't like it. He started texting more, pressing more, wanting more. More time, more attention, more of me than I had left to give. He didn't understand that for me, this wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't a secret thrill. It was a weight around my neck, dragging me deeper every day into a version of my life I didn't want to be living. Eric noticed the change too. He thought I was just stressed, overwhelmed, maybe even depressed. He booked a weekend getaway for us, just the two of us. No phones, no work, no distractions. He planned every detail, the hotel, the restaurants, the hikes, trying so hard to bring us back to a place he didn't even realize we had left long ago. And I went along with it. Packed a suitcase, smiled for pictures, kissed him under the stars. Played the part of the loving wife so well I almost convinced myself it was still true. But it wasn't. Every time Eric touched me, every time he looked at me with that open, trusting face, it felt like another knife twisting deeper under my ribs. The guilt wasn't a flicker anymore. It was a constant roar. I stopped meeting Dylan after work. Stopped answering his texts right away. Started making up more and more excuses until even he stopped pretending not to notice. One night, when I finally agreed to meet him for coffee just to talk, he sat across from me with a tight jaw and tired eyes and asked, "What are we doing?" And I didn't have an answer, because I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what any of it meant, what it was supposed to mean, what I was even hoping to find in those stolen hours anymore. I went home that night and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside, trying to summon the courage to tell Eric everything, to rip the bandage off and let the wound bleed out, no matter how ugly it got. But when I walked through the door, our son came running up to me, clutching a picture he had drawn of our family. Stick figures all holding hands, smiling under a lopsided sun. And Eric smiled at me over his shoulder from the kitchen where he was cooking dinner. And I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't destroy that. I couldn't rip the ground out from under them just to lighten the weight crushing me. So I lied again, and again, and again. And the lies started rotting everything from the inside out. I didn't recognize myself anymore. Not in the mirror. Not in Eric's eyes. Not even in Dylan's touch. I wasn't the woman who fell in love with Eric. I wasn't the girl who blushed under Dylan's gaze. I was something hollow and trembling and desperate, clinging to a life built on secrets because the truth felt too dangerous to speak out loud. And somewhere deep down, I knew the truth would come for me eventually. Because guilt is patient. It waits. It grows. And one day, it demands to be paid in full. It didn't unravel all at once the way I used to imagine it would. Didn't explode in some cinematic confrontation with slammed doors and broken dishes and screaming matches that left us breathless and empty. No, it eroded quietly, like water dripping through stone, slow and relentless until one day I woke up and realized I was standing on ruins and still pretending it was a home. The lies were too heavy by then, woven so tightly into the fabric of our lives that I couldn't remember which parts had ever been real and which parts I had made up just to survive. Eric kept trying. He planned more trips, more date nights, little surprises left on my pillow, texts in the middle of the day just to say he loved me. He fought for us in all the ways he knew how, never realizing he was fighting a ghost of a marriage that had died the first night I walked into Dylan's arms and didn't walk away. I stopped answering Dylan's messages altogether, stopped meeting him, stopped pretending that what we had was anything but a slow-motion disaster wearing the mask of excitement. Dylan didn't fight it. Maybe he knew it was over, too. Maybe he found someone else to fill the empty spaces I left behind. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. There were nights I thought about telling Eric the truth, thought about sitting him down at the kitchen table, staring at the worn wood between us, and confessing everything. I even practiced sometimes, whispering the words in the dark when I couldn't sleep, testing out different versions of the story to see if any of them sounded less like a confession and more like an apology he could forgive. But every time I pictured the look on his face, the way it would crumble, the way it would hollow out into something broken beyond repair, I swallowed the words down and promised myself one more day, one more week, one more lie to get through the night. It wasn't just about losing him. It was about losing the version of myself I still wanted to believe existed. The good wife, the good mother, the woman who made mistakes but never destroyed the people who loved her. But I had already destroyed him. He just didn't know it yet. The guilt didn't fade. It thickened. It pressed against my chest, made it hard to breathe, made my skin itch with the need to claw my way out of the life I had built brick by brick out of betrayal and cowardice. Some days it felt like Eric could see it too, like he was watching me from across the room and trying to figure out what had shifted, what had died between us that he couldn't name. His touches grew softer, more hesitant, like he was afraid he would break me if he held on too tight. His smiles faltered more often. His eyes stayed sad longer. He never asked, though. Never demanded explanations, never forced the truth into the open where we would both have to look at it. Maybe because he loved me too much. Maybe because he was too scared of what he might hear. Or maybe deep down, he already knew and decided it was easier to love the lie than to live with the truth. And me? I kept lying. Not to him. Not really. To myself. I told myself that people made mistakes, that not every marriage was perfect, that secrets could be buried deep enough if you just packed enough dirt on top. But I knew better. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw it. The cracks, the rot, the quiet, slow death of everything good I had ever been. I loved Eric. In some broken, twisted way, I did. Maybe that's what made it worse. Maybe that's why I could never forgive myself. Because love isn't supposed to look like betrayal. It's not supposed to feel like guilt bleeding you dry one lie at a time. And now, every morning when I wake up beside him, every time our son calls me mom with a smile that doesn't know what I've done, every moment of normalcy we manage to cling to, I carry it with me. A silent, invisible wound that never stops aching. I don't know if he'll ever find out. I don't know if someday the truth will claw its way out of the grave I buried it in. All I know is that I lost something I can never get back. Not because Eric left, but because somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I left first.